afternoon and welcome to this episode of the Economic Times Cutting Chai Stories, an initiative by ET Edge. I'm your host Dimple Bajwa and I bring to you conversations with business leaders where we discuss their personal and professional journeys along with some other really engaging topics. Cutting Chai Stories is a platform that identifies leaders and brings out their traits, routines, and thought processes that make these leaders stand out in the industry across different sectors and verticals. And today I have been joined by a very special guest, a business leader who has an expansive career spanning more than 26 years, who has worked in several different domains such as FMCG, process manufacturing, operational leasing and maintenance, asset management, pharmaceuticals, retail, CPG, and is now a leader in the telecom sector. Without further ado, let me now welcome Mr. Vinod Krishnan, Chief Information Officer, Indus Towers Limited. Thank you for joining us, sir.
Thank you very much, Dimple.
So you've worked with some big companies, like Hindustan Unilever Limited, General Electronics, Walmart India, and now you're working with Indus Towers, among others that you've worked with. And you worked across different domains. It would be really fascinating to hear from a leader like you, about your professional journey from the beginning until now.
So it's quite kind of interesting, Dimple, that when I graduated management school and joined Hindustan Lever as a management trainee, I spent my first 3 years of my professional life, wondering what I was doing in the IT area. As a management graduate in technology, you're faced with the challenges of sometimes feeling like you don't belong because most of your peers, and particularly when I started my career, it was almost de rigueur that you had to be only an engineer and you had to have started in the trenches and worked as a programmer and worked with IT companies before you got into that responsibility. And for a freshly minted management graduate to get into effectively the back room of the company when everybody else was hogging the limelight, it created no end of angst. And I think for the first 3 years I was like, should I be getting out of IT while the going's good? Having said that, and all these years later, I'm deeply reassured and happy about having made the right choice back then, even if it didn't feel like it. I think that back office is now the front office. I joke in my organization that you can do anything you want up to 50 towers, and we have 175,000 of them. But when you hit number 51, if you're not with me or my team, then you're doomed to failure. And it's so satisfying when people understand that the lifeblood, the thing that keeps us running, especially in these last few months of the pandemic, it's apparent more than ever that without this infrastructure, without these applications, we're sitting ducks.
Right.
And if I look at it that way, it's amazingly satisfying. Now, one of the things that all these huge companies that I worked in have in common is their recognition of IT as something that needs to be nurtured, and you can't just leave it to technical people. So that confluence of understanding what that technology can do for the business and how do you do it, that's a common theme across all the companies I've worked for. Whether it was Walmart, which is obviously one of the biggest companies in the world in terms of their reach and scale, you can imagine that I'm sitting with 175,000 towers and they're sitting with about as many stores. So you look at that and you think, well, what does operating at scale require? And all of them have been blessed to have leaders and role models who understood how to put technology together with business. Never asking them, but what can we do and how can we do it? And I've enjoyed that because across all these 14 or so domains that I've worked in, the rules of IT are the same. Applying technology to solve business problems, to give people what they need, not necessarily what they want, but to give them what they need to do their jobs daily. And it's immensely satisfying when you look at it that way, that there is more in common across these domains when it comes to IT than there is that is different.
Right. Very, very nicely explained, sir. So you talked about rethinking of your field, and you said you had thoughts of changing your field. So there are times when you actually rethink of your career and you start thinking of going out of the way and doing something that you might have probably never thought about, or taking up a job that was never on your list? Have like, if how would you what would you suggest to the generation, today's generation, who are confused at most of the times, who don't know how to go ahead with their career, or who have thoughts of changing their career lines and everything? What would you suggest to them?
So I always believe, and this is something that a lot of my mentors and key individuals told me, is that take the jobs that nobody wants. There's a lot less competition for those jobs, and when you actually turn them around, they make a huge difference. Now, as I said, I had this angst about IT and what should I do, and after that I realized that there are certain things that in my personality are very well suited to an IT role. One is the idea of looking at the big picture, looking at the breadth of it. So today finance comes in and says, okay, solve this problem and push it down the pike to marketing. I'm actually in a position to say, no, that's not a solution, because it just pushes it to him and he'll come back to me next week with the exact same problem, asking me to push it back to you. So, here's what we need to do to solve it. And I think that perspective enables me to really do a number of roles. So when I was in Walmart in India, I was very fortunate to get an opportunity to actually run a fledgling e-commerce P&L. So I was already looking after the technology for it. So it wasn't about the IT for it, but it was the larger business model. How do you run a ship from store e-commerce model within the larger company? And obviously there was a very interesting management aspects to it. Like after years of sitting in the management committee and seeing the P&L heads get roasted on a regular basis, it was very novel to be one of them for a change. But I think it wasn't as hard as I thought it would be. The broad understanding allows you to plug things in. So I always am fond of saying that CIOs are like the plumbers of the organization. You see the plumbing, where the things are clogged. So when you get a chance to actually do something about those from a responsibility point of view, it actually works out very well, because you know where the problems are, you know what to go after. Obviously, one of the things that makes it hard, for especially people in technology to do other roles is, one is we love technology. I can't think of a time when I won't be messing around with some of these, I hate to call them toys because they're not, but some of these newer technologies, I'd rather do a number of things than give up that. But the other part actually is that it's not easy. It's not easy to manage enterprise IT. There's so many moving parts. The governments keep adding rules. E-invoicing, which happened recently, is a case in point. Things change. Your company changes, the environment changes, and keeping this ship running with all those changes is a huge responsibility that I take very seriously. And unfortunately, that is part of what makes it so much more difficult to walk away from this and go do something else. Having said that, I believe, running a department or running a function that is this complex enables you to pretty much do any corporate job. At various points in my career, I've been offered roles of supply chain head. The P&L at Walmart, of course, was a nice bonus. But I've always believed that I want to be in the trenches with the technology and get these things done. My advice actually to youngsters would be to do what makes them feel good, at the cost of sleepless nights in data centers, no Christmas or New Year celebrations, because that's when we're doing all our work while everybody else is playing.
Right.
I wouldn't give that back for anything. So I guess that's how I'd answer.
Wonderful. That's wonderful, sir. So your LinkedIn bio says that you have the ability and have invested hugely in developing your teams to positions of increased responsibility. And you also, mentioned about CIOs being the plumbers, and how to take responsibilities to keep the ship running. So here, I would like you to tell us more about your leadership qualities and your leadership style, and mainly something that you would want your team to inherit from you.
Sure. Very early in my career, I went to one of these leadership conferences where they split you up into teams and make it competitive. And G was very good at that. And at the end of it, there was this feedback, and there were these two young women from China who were part of our team, the team that I somehow managed to kind of commandeer through this exercise. And one of them gave me a feedback. She said, you're an excellent leader. We love it when waters are quiet. You're one of the most benevolent leaders.
Wow.
But when things become rough, you kind of take charge. And you didn't let us talk through that. So, in crisis mode, you are, I believe she used the word Hitler, but I will, pass lightly over that.
Right.
I think, my learning from then was that, look, you know, mm, there are two ways of solving that. One is I become a nicer person, and two is I avoid things from getting into that level of crisis that, that mode comes out.
Right.
But I think, frankly, it's an honor and it's a privilege to be able to say that in my team, I've done everybody's job. At some point in time, I've been that person. And that brings an understanding of how to kind of deal with what that person is going through and kind of show that person where he or she needs to put their efforts and how to get things done. And my approach has generally been to be benevolent, but with a very sharp eye on things. So my team knows when I walk the halls and stop by at somebody's desk, there's a pin drop silence because everybody wants to hear what I'm interested in and what I'm following up on. And
Right.
sometimes it just be, what's going on with this. And then, I really don't have to say much after that because then somebody knows I'm looking. And I think it helps, as I said, that I've done their jobs that I know what to look for. So there's the signs of danger that somebody might see today. I probably would have seen middle of last week. So, I can afford to be a little more gentle with the team. I have, at the moment, over 1,000 people that have worked with me that are in various positions. And certainly in GE, I ran our IT leadership program. So I had the mandate to bring in leaders. And I'm proudest of the fact that at least 5 of those leaders whom I brought in have overtaken me significantly in GE and outside. So they're bigger CIOs than I am today. And I could not
Wow.
be prouder about it.
Wow, that's amazing. So that's really amazing. So the next question will help us understand the other side of Mr. Krishnan. So I would want to know, what does a day in your life look like? I know there might be a lot of work on your agenda most of the time, but I would like you to tell us more about the family activities that you indulge in on maybe weekends or maybe after your
Sure.
working hours.
So, while I'm very passionate armchair sports person, I've unfortunately, not been blessed with any kind of athletic ability whatsoever. So I have two left feet and my hand-eye coordination is pretty pathetic. But on the bright side, I'm a very, very good armchair sports person across sports, across genres, from the Winter Olympics to field hockey. I'm a walking encyclopedia of stats. The IPL, my colleagues all take my input for sweepstakes like you wouldn't believe. And I believe my record in the last two, or rather 1.5 IPLs has been two matches called wrong.
Wow.
With all the nail biters, you can imagine that's not pure coincidence anymore. But I love sport. I love watching sport and I enjoy that. I was very avid quizzer in college. I still keep my hand in with a lot of quizzing and reading and stuff like that. I try very hard not to do any professional reading on weekends and stuff like that. And I have a 12-year-old who is absolutely the fulcrum of my life. So I play a lot of games with him. He, of course, manages to beat me like nobody's business on most of the console based games. But I prefer to take it easy and, rest up and read because my work days are pretty intense. Uh, and even in that, I try to find some time to think and strategize whenever I can. But a lot of work goes in, the routine of the day. Fortunately, I don't need much sleep, so that helps.
Right. So, between our personal and professional lives, somehow, sometimes we forget to maintain a work-life balance. So, you're a leader. So, I would want to know from a leader like you, who has decades of experience, if you are able to maintain that work-life balance, and if you do, how do you do? How do you maintain that balance?
So I'll start with a little story. In I think 2001, I lived in Gurgaon. In a house by myself. I hadn't got married yet. And I would return from a flight, let's say from Hong Kong at 2:30 in the morning. And at 6 in the morning, my modem would start. We had these dial-up modems, right? So my modem would start, and at 8 in the morning, my driver would be outside with the car, and my landlord asked him, he said, "Is this guy crazy?" Because he came in at 2:30, he rang the doorbell at 3:30. I let him in because it was one of those downstairs, upstairs places. And I had to convince them that, I wasn't working so hard because I was worried about keeping my job or something, but because I liked it, you know. And I think the idea of work-life balance implies that there's a trade-off. In my view, there's not. If there's something important to do at home, if there is something going on at home, if I need to go and do something and take care of something, there is absolutely no doubt in my mind, and not only for myself, but for anybody in my team. All I ask is that you inform me that, hey, I've got to go out, I've got to step out for this is important. And finish your work when you can. There will always be stuff to do, there will always be work to do. Yes, absolutely. If there's something important that you're missing because of a personal commitment, then it's your job to let me know, and it's my job to let somebody else know and kind of take care of it. But I believe it's a continuum. You do what you have to at the points at which you have to do it, and that is your balance. Yes, would I like to put my feet up for the rest of my life? Probably get bored out of my skull in a day, but I believe the idea is really that you do what needs to be done at that point in time and what is the right thing to do. So, son, school, play, absolutely. Everything else can, go right out the window. Now you have to come back and work till 3 on that presentation that you have to give to your boss. That is absolutely part of the drill. That's what you signed up for.
Right.
That's how I see work-life balance.
Right. Very interesting. Something like that coming from you. It's very interesting. Okay. So this is my last question, but definitely it's one of the most important ones. As we see the cases of depression and anxiety rising among the millennials. What would your message be to those who are prone to anxiety, depression, and stress?
These are, I think, look, these are facets. These are part of what happens. These are feelings, and there's a lot of literature, and I follow a lot of that around. Uh, and I'm sorry to say, I'm not one of those who believe that you can make it sunny. No, it's going to rain. Things are going to happen. A lot of things are going to happen that are not your fault, that are not great. My view has always been that it's okay to get sad. It's okay to get depressed. It's okay to be angry, and sometimes it's okay to lose your rag as well, in a situation that ostensibly you shouldn't, or you should know better than to. But that happens, and that is what makes us all human, and that is what makes us all endearing. The question to me is, what do you do with that? How do you process that? How do you stare it in the face? And a good part of that is just knowing yourself, which is a lot of times people snowball these things. I'm depressed. There must be something wrong with me. I need to do something about it. And often it just stops at the first one. I'm depressed. Let me enjoy that depression. Let me spend time in it. Let me engage with that thing that is making me depressed, and allow it to settle, and talk myself out of it. It's like, hello darkness, my friend, if you've heard that one. It is,
Right.
there is some little bit of that you need to do. Show me somebody who's relentlessly optimistic and happy, and I'll show you a person that's a serious basket case. Because these things happen, and these cycles come, and people deal with them, and that is really how you get out of them. What you need to do is stop obsessing about it. Why am I feeling like this? And when you get into these meta thoughts, you create further pressure on yourself. A lot of times, just I want to be alone with this thought. I want to engage with it. I certainly believe that running from these thoughts is about as counterproductive as responding immediately to them. So you need to let them settle, kind of air them out till they go away. And I can tell you this, that there are times when I believe that, okay, there is a lot of darkness around, there is a lot of gloom around. And I'm thinking, look, will I still feel this way about this thing 3 months from now? Is it such a big deal that 3 months from now it will still stay in my head that this was a dark day in my life? You'll be surprised how often the answer to that question is, I will not remember it this weekend. And then I think it gives you a perspective which says, okay, it's right. Especially at this time when there is so much doom and gloom and loved ones are suffering or beyond suffering these days. I think it's something to think about, to say, look, yes, it is what it is, and we spend that time in our dark thoughts honoring that person. And then life has this amazing way of going on, and things have this amazing way of happening, and just by the laws of probability something good will come along in the next few days, and you will use that as that ladder to pull yourself out of that depression.
Right.
The impulse is, a lot of people feel that this is an unnatural state. I shouldn't be sad. Hell no. I mean, I think, it is perfectly natural for you to have a day when, you're snapping at people, or a day when things are not going well. And I think all that you need to do is recognize that, sit gently to the side, wallow in that for a bit, and make sure you snap out of it in time.
Absolutely. I can't agree more. I mean, it was quite insightful. Your answer to that question was very insightful. And like all good things come to an end, this conversation too has come to an end, sir. This interaction with you, Mr. Krishnan, has been very interesting, and it gave us some fascinating insights into your personal and professional life. That was a very engaging conversation with you, sir. And with this, we come to the end of this Cutting Chai Stories interview.